how can digital transformation, including tools like digital twins, help AEC firms meet sustainability goals while staying compliant with evolving regulations?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think it's an area that has gained more traction recently. I think a key advantage of digital twins is their ability to simulate and test ideas, right, all virtually. It allows you to see it, and once you have that model built, you can really explore ways to improve energy efficiency, reduce waste, optimize resources, all without real upfront costs. I mean, there's a cost to a digital twin or a simulation, but compared to, putting shovel in dirt, it's definitely less. So as an example,
welcome to this episode of the AEC Engineering and Technology Podcast, a podcast dedicated to helping engineering professionals find technology that fits their needs. Digital twins have been making waves in the architecture, engineering, construction industry, promising to revolutionize the way we design, build, and operate buildings and infrastructure. But what exactly are digital twins, and how can they enhance sustainability within AEC firms? Joining me in this episode is John Glenski, Senior Director of Industry Strategy, Automation, and Digital at Salas O'Brien, to speak about how digital twin technology is empowering AEC firms to achieve environmental sustainability, meet regulatory requirements, and revolutionize project efficiency. From optimizing building design to reducing energy consumption and minimizing waste, digital twins are reshaping the future of the AEC industry. I'm your host, Nick Heim, and this is the AEC Engineering and Technology Podcast. With that, let's jump into today's episode. All right, it's now time for our conversation of the week with John Glenski. John, thank you so much for taking the time to join the show.
Thank you, Nick. It's glad to come on. Happy to engage, man.
So, John, can you start by telling us a little bit more about yourself and what led to your current role as a Senior Director of Industry Strategy, Automation, and Digital at Salas O'Brien?
Yeah, certainly, Nick. Thanks for asking. For me, I come from a family of 9, and all of us kind of share a passion for solving problems. And, that mindset deeply influenced my career path, as I think it does for a lot of engineers. And it ultimately led me to Salas O'Brien. I started my career as a plant automation engineer at a factory in Ohio. And it was interesting, despite the company being an industry leader, I was really struck by how much effort went into maintaining outdated equipment. It was inefficient, it was mentally draining, and I knew there had to be like a better way, right? And that experience really sparked a question for me that's kind of guided me through my career. And it's, how can we use technology to transform U.S. factories so they can really lead the world again, right? I mean, we have some world leaders, but I think we have some that, there's some opportunity. And so I progressed in my career, first to a machine fabricator, and then ultimately to an AEC firm here in Cincinnati and consulting. And throughout, I noticed a gap in the market, right? Large AEC firms weren't really prioritizing automation or smart factory transformations. And system integrators really lacked the engineering or construction capabilities for holistic solutions. Modernizing these facilities required an integrated approach. And that really combined engineering, automation, construction, and even more so as internal manufacturing teams were shrinking. So in my mid-30s, I kind of faced a choice, right? I want to maybe start my own company or innovate within my existing firm, and I chose the latter. Pitched an idea, let's create this automation-focused business within our existing company. How can we take that, couple it with engineering, couple it with construction, and, took a financial leap, became president of that, and built a turnkey organization, really focused on factory transformation. And, the results were transformative. We gained national recognition, we expanded into some new markets, and established some global partnerships with leading industrial automation firms. And in 2023, we merged with Salas O'Brien. Salas O'Brien is an AEC leader to really take our vision further. And now we have almost 4,000 teammates, 90 offices providing AEC and technical consulting. And for my own role right now, I'm proud to lead all of our automation and digital teams, really driving innovation, driving impact, and ultimately helping our clients reimagine what's possible in manufacturing.
Really well said, John. So the audience, pay attention to this one because as John just described, right, you don't necessarily need to go off on your own as an entrepreneur to accomplish your goals. You can be an entrepreneur within your own company and do something unique, which I know I'm really excited to learn more about here, John.
Yeah, no, it's a good point, Nick. I think so many times you think entrepreneurial mindset, innovation is it's a new widget, it's a new business company. But you're right. I think you can really if you have an open-minded leadership team within your organization, there's opportunities to really innovate from within. And sometimes that can make the biggest difference in your career.
Absolutely. And John, moving along here. So how can
Yeah.
digital transformation, including tools like digital twins, help AEC firms meet sustainability goals while staying compliant with evolving regulations?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think it's an area that has gained more traction recently, really since COVID. I know there's a lot of sustainability goals within some of the European firms we work with. It is driving into U.S. manufacturing too. And, I think a key advantage of digital twins is their ability to simulate and test ideas, right, all virtually. It allows you to see it, test it before you have to make physical changes. And once you have that model built, you can really explore ways to improve energy efficiency, reduce waste, optimize resources, all without real upfront costs. I mean, there's a cost to a digital twin or a simulation, but compared to, putting shovel in dirt, it's definitely less. So as an example, you can test how different materials, layouts, or systems impact energy consumption or emissions. We've got a project with a large chemical manufacturer where we simulated their facility, and then we started looking at how they brought raw materials to site, right? They use barges, they use railroad cars, they use trucks. How can we test different delivery of raw materials, right, to ultimately reduce how much carbon they're using from a logistics side? So there's areas that you can really dive into when you go holistic to the site or all your sites right across North America that can not only ensure that you're getting data-driven decisions, but it can really drive to compliance as well. Because there's always evolving regulations and, whether the regulations go up or down, they're always there. And so how can you drive long-term cost savings, operational efficiency? Those digital twins can help. And digital tools like that really enable firms, I think, to innovate responsibly while contributing to a more sustainable and ultimately competitive future for them and their employees.
And John, great summary there. And we know it's all about the data, and digital twins are just one way of say like a simulation in the context that we're talking about. But I think when we start to talk about technology and innovation, there's always a fear of data overwhelm. So how can AEC firms take steps to ensure that these tools are providing actual insights and not just more data and data overwhelm?
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Nick. For 25 years, I've been in the automation, digital data space, and I don't think there's any engineer I've talked to, any manager that hasn't had a project where they were promised a lot of great data, a lot of great actions coming from the data. We're going to get all these KPIs, and then it just ultimately didn't meet the goals. So I think, one of the steps to take to really ensure that you get actual insights instead of just adding more data is you need to identify what's the purpose of the data, right? What are you going to use that data for? And then how do you integrate those with those advanced analytic tools that you probably already have in your own organization? Now, they may not be within your exact team or your exact business, but I'm sure for a lot of our listeners, there's a team out there that is analytically focused within your organization, and they'll be able to help. And I think it's also essential, and it's all up front here, is how do you focus on specific metrics that really align with your business goals, your project goals, whatever those might be, right? So it could be energy efficiency, it could be cost reduction, ROI, maybe it's sustainability, right? You're trying to hit some key metric from the CEO or maybe some regulatory body, and you got to prioritize. So I think there's a lot of upfront effort that can go in. It's not that costly. It takes a little time, but it really lays out what you're trying to achieve and how can you drive that through accountability. And then you can take that data, you can have data-driven decision-making, and you can ensure that you take that data and you update it continuously. I think that's the second piece of how you keep providing actionable insights is it's not a one-step process, right? I think of it more as the data ecosystem, right? You want to be able to continually have data coming in, data going out, and identify those key KPIs that are going to transform your business and really have accurate data because, the old saying, garbage in, garbage out is true. You want to make sure that that data is useful. I'd say the last thing in terms of how do you take the data and make it actionable, right, is collaboration. I think that's an area that sometimes gets lost. And I touched on a little earlier about that business analytics team, or maybe it's your OT/IT team. You've got to have your digital twin, your simulation, your data model integrate input from not only the engineering team or the maintenance team or operations, but also perhaps it's the construction team, perhaps it's the management team, right? To create that comprehensive, accurate model that provides real-time feedback. I think this is an area, and AI is obviously something that's really transforming our industry. But what AI does to me that makes it most impactful is it brings data forward, right? It allows you to make real-time decisions faster to optimize your business, optimize your production, optimize how you're executing. And ultimately, that's going to help transform your business with that digital component.
John, I want to highlight that first point you made, and what I like to call them are problems worth solving instead of, let's say, a solution in search of a problem, because ultimately
you're right.
It's business goals, business objectives, what you as an organization are trying to accomplish, and then going to find technology and innovating to meet those requirements instead of a flashy solution where we, maybe it looks great or it looks cool, but it's not really driving any business objectives. So to the audience, when you're considering any sort of innovation, just make sure you're very clear on what you're trying to accomplish before you get started.
Yeah, that's a really good point. We've got another partner that we've worked with, and they really took digital twins and data and utilized it as like a supply chain initiative, right? To transform how they execute supply chain. And so that gave them that baseline, like you said, of worthwhile executable projects to support that overall initiative. And I think that's a really good point of you don't just do these projects to do these projects, right? You do these projects to make the business better.
So John, we know that the skills gap in AEC is an ongoing issue, whether you want to admit it today or 5 years or 10 years from now, depending on your specific business. It's there or it's coming. So with the growing skills gap in the industry, what practical approaches can companies use to upskill teams and ensure they're proficient in new systems and technologies?
No, Nick, good question. I think that's one area where we probably have the most conversations with our clients on, I don't have the same amount of resources I used to have. I've got more and more work than I ever did, right? There's so much onshoring, so much reshoring coming back to North America. And how can I take my team that maybe hasn't built a greenfield factory, right? Or hasn't expanded double the size of the capacity of what we have, and really upscale them, number one, to be able to execute that project, but number two, be able to work with their partners or vendors or contractors to get it all done. Because at the end of the day, when you have a big project like that, it's critical that you have that collaboration. So for me, I always say I think there's several practical approaches, right? None of these are the right answer, but I think all of them together can really help to ensure proficiency, right? When it comes into new systems, new technologies, new types of projects. And first, and this is kind of an old adage, but it still rings true today, is really fostering that culture of continuous learning, right? You've got to keep learning, because as technology changes, and it's only changing faster, you've got to be able to stay up with that, because what you don't want is a situation where you're working with a team and there's something coming in that you're not quite sure, right? How can you keep learning, stay on top of that? And I think that's a critical component for all engineers these days. From an employee standpoint, or employer, I should say, I think it's really providing training, right, to their employees. Part of that drives back to that continuous learning. And now with so much online, so many abilities or capabilities, I should say, for the employee to be able to engage and get some training, it kind of goes counterintuitive to like, there's so much work, we don't have the time. But that training allows the employee to learn, to engage, to continue that love of growth, and ultimately will help the business. And it ensures they're not just familiar with the latest technologies, but can also apply them effectively. I think that's one of the biggest questions is, how do you take AI, right? How do you take cobots, autonomous robots? How do you apply them in your site effectively? And I think that's where you can really learn. I think training should be collaborative, right? You allow teams to learn together, share insights, solve problems collectively. It encourages cross-functional learning, which is crucial when you're dealing with these complex integrated systems on bigger jobs, or even complex integrated systems as you look to apply automation or digital twins within your facility. Lastly, I'll say, identify and empower early adapters. I think a lot of times There's individuals that are quick to embrace new technology and can become champions for the rest of the team. Encourage those early adapters to spread the good news, right? Maybe it's internally based webinars, right? Or lunch and learns, right? Where you can kind of share as that early adapter that this makes sense. And it kind of dovetails into mentorship. And that's the last point I'll make is mentorship's crucial, right? You need to have that hands-on mentorship to accelerate the learning process. But it's not just mentors that are that seasoned team mentoring those younger resources, right? It's also those younger, it's called reverse mentorship. It's those younger resources mentoring the older team. And I think by combining that together, you're going to ensure that knowledge is passed on, it's absorbed, and you can really accelerate your business collectively.
John, that was really well said. And I do like to highlight reverse mentorship all the time because as someone who's early mid-career in myself, what I've come to realize is the more you can give as you're taking, learning from your more experienced colleagues, learning how the job is actually done, but giving back to them and being someone who can understand what the trends in technology are, how are they applied to the business, in even just the basics of saving them time on something that's been really been eating away. Of like, hey, I know there's a better way to do this, I just don't have the time. And by being that resource going up, I think it accelerates and really makes the relationship two-way instead of just being fed top down.
Right. And it's interesting. I think everyone in their career, and it's different for everyone, right? In terms of when in your career, but you realize, to your point, you want to give back. Right. And I think for me, at the beginning of my career, it's like, what can I do for myself? And as I progress through the career, it's like, what can I do for others? And how can I help that next generation, the previous generation? How can I help collectively across the board drive the team forward? Because at the end of the day, it's almost like sports, right? I mean, individual glory is great, but if you achieve team glory, you'll have individual glory. And how can you drive that team forward, as an AEC firm? Is I think an area where the companies that figure that out are really going to be successful as we move forward with less and less resources. And those that don't, are going to struggle.
Absolutely. And John, this is a great segue into our next question, because even with the advent of technologies like AI that are taking off at a pace that's doesn't really have any precedent, there's still a job to be done. There's still existing legacy systems that are in place. So how can engineering professionals balance the need for these cutting edge digital tools with the challenges of integrating it into what's existing, the legacy systems?
Yeah, I think that is one of the biggest challenges out there, right? Because it goes back to time, right? No one has enough time. I think there's an area, and it really cuts across, I think, almost all business. It's optimization, keep doing more with less, keep doing more with less. I see it so much in the manufacturing environment, right? Even to 10 years ago. And I think COVID was one of those tipping points, but it's also, there's a globalization component. And so it's a really good question about utilizing those tools to really drive forward. So how do you balance those cutting edge tools with legacy systems? I think first, it really is a strategic approach or a phased approach, right? I think you need to look, if you're talking manufacturing, assess what you have in place. And that's just not equipment on the floor, right? It could be, how do you engage with your CMMS, right? How do you engage with some of your suppliers? And have a team or an individual that's champion there that can really identify the limitations and the opportunities for integration. Because the one thing that, in my opinion, can be really challenging is if you have this great new piece of software, this great new digital tool, you spend a lot of money on it, but you don't have the infrastructure underneath to be able to integrate it into your system, whatever that infrastructure is. So having a modular approach to that transformation allows for identification of the infrastructure, and then also allows for your engineering team or your management team to implement tools, once again, strategically or incrementally, right? You do it incrementally, it reduces the risk. Large scale overhauls, I think, is where people typically go, but it's not always the best path, right? And so if you have tools that can deliver value immediately, right, show an ROI, I think that's really beneficial, because a lot of these tools, they come with risk to management on the investment side. And how can you justify that risk quickly? I'd say the last piece is, don't underestimate the importance of change management and training. Even the most advanced tools won't succeed without buy-in from the teams. And so much in engineering is like, not so much tell me what to do, but show me how this helps. And so that sort of training, that show me how this helps training, can really emphasize the tangible benefits of the tools that you're getting, whether it's efficiency gain, cost savings, optimize, team engagement, whatever. And it can build that culture that embraces innovation, but still respects those legacy systems that a lot of those engineers probably worked on and gave lots of hours, dedication, and sacrifice to implement, maintain, and drive forward.
And I can speak from experience here, John. It is absolutely true that finding the tool or finding the efficiency is the easy part. It's the implementation, the training, and then making sure people know what's possible. And by showing them, I think is one of the best ways to do so.
Yeah, I agree. I think all of our listeners have had a situation where a new tool, a new practice, a new methodology was implemented with very little training and with very little sharing of what the benefits are, except maybe management saying there's benefits. And I think when you get buy-in, whether it's with your own kids or with your teammates or outside of work, things just go smoother, and people ultimately want these things to succeed, right? You may have some naysayers, but if they can see benefits to them, they're going to want it to succeed, and ultimately that'll help your business succeed.
And keeping on this topic, John, how do you see advancements in digital strategy reshaping the future of collaboration between architects, engineers, and construction teams?
Yeah, no, that's happening right now. And I think it's really accelerating. And so I'd even almost say revolutionizing. It allows opportunities for deeper alignment and more efficient workflows by what's going on. And I'll give you an example. I was out in New York City earlier this year with an architect we were working with, and they had an immersive 360-degree simulation room. It was really neat. I don't know if all your listeners have seen one of these, but basically you walk in, they close the door, right? It's got the projectors, it's got the screens. You are immersed in the middle of this digital twin. And so what these spaces allow you to do is, of course, it showcases the designs, it showcases technologies, but it lets your stakeholders walk through a proposed environment, right? The surroundings move dynamically around you. You can be inside a large setting, let's say a stadium, right? And you can see how long does it take for me to walk from the front of the stadium to the subway stop, or from the front of the stadium to the mall next door. And it's in real time. So you're walking through it and the surroundings are changing with you. So that level of immersion, you can bring in the construction team before you build it. You can bring in the stakeholders that are paying for it, the board, the CEO, maybe it's a public-private partnership, whatever it is. And it ultimately fosters better communication across all those AEC disciplines. Architects can illustrate their creative vision with incredible clarity, right? It's not just paper, and it's not even just you stick a headset on. Because I've always said, like, if you got to put a headset on, it doesn't give you the feeling of being there because you still have that headset on, right? But when you're immersed, it can really change that. And you can have challenges, opportunities, right? Everything that an engineer can come up that can be wrong, because engineers are very good at finding, what those challenges are. You can find it early in the design process. And it's together, it's collaborative, and ultimately it's going to reduce misunderstandings, miscommunications, and hopefully rework down the line holistically. And I guess the last piece there is you can visualize the end product in ways that just other immersive or other, obviously, static plans can't, and that drives greater satisfaction. So, that's just one example of where advancements are driving that collaboration faster and earlier in the process, right? Nothing's hit the ground yet. It's all in the digital space. But as these tools become more widely adapted and you couple it with the power that AI brings, I see those becoming integral to the project delivery methods, right? There's 3D, there's 4D, there's 5D, but you bring this in there as well. It's going to make collaboration the backbone. And you look at some of the delivery models, right, in terms of how some of the manufacturing end users are driving projects with lean, IPD, right? It's becoming more and more collaborative, more skin in the game for all of those partners. And this is one way that you can enhance that communication. I think it's going to reshape the dynamic between architects, engineers, and construction. And it's already been moving there, right? There just wasn't a way with technology to kind of bring it, and now there is. So as that expands to more and more teams across North America and globally, I really do think it's going to drive efficiency, creativity, and ultimately drive better outcomes.
Excellent, John. And I think that's one we're all familiar with because 2D plans are simply a way to communicate internally or within project teams, AE or C. But for our owners who may just not be well versed in reading 2D plans and then recreating what's on paper in 3D, that full immersion experience sounds like it's really a way to get them engaged at a level that just otherwise wasn't possible with just 2D plans.
Yeah, and it's really neat, Nick. I mean, you can even go into so much detail where you show the MEP plans, right, overlaid within the building, and you can always do that with the AR headsets. But now, just that immersion capability, they showed another example where they were doing a commercial space, right, skyscraper, and you could look out of each floor of the skyscraper, right, as you went up the skyscraper to see the view of the city. It was impressive.
John, so great example there, and we'll close with this. What final piece of advice can you give to AEC professionals aiming to stay ahead in an industry increasingly driven by digital transformation and sustainability goals?
Yeah, no, it's a good question because the digital side is only advancing and sustainability is there. It's funny, when I think of sustainability, I feel like AEC professionals, they've always done that, right? It's kind of been baked into what we've done, and now it's just being codified or clarified, or there's a regulatory body that's saying, hey, we need to do it, or the consumer, right? The consumer wants that from their product that they're buying. So I think to really thrive in a landscape that's defined by digital transformation and sustainability, there's 3 areas of focus. And this is what I share with our teams and others is first is responsiveness, right? Being responsive to your teammates, being responsive to the owners, it's critical. Continuous learning, we touched on that a little. And then really building diverse mentorship networks, right? So you look at responsiveness as the technological changes and the regulatory changes happen to rapid, and often, and I see it with our clients, I'm sure the listeners see it with their clients, they're evolving challenges and they're evolving quickly. And especially if you're an international firm, right? You got to deal with Europe, you got to deal with North America, you got Asia, and the ability to adapt quickly and provide innovative, tailored solutions, I think will set you apart. Whether you're in your first or second year, right, as an engineer, or in your 32nd, 33rd, 50th year as an engineer, I don't think that changes, right? It's listen actively, anticipate needs, respond with clarity and precision. Continuous learning, we kind of touched on that a little earlier in the podcast, but there's so many tools, there's so many different practices, methodologies, it's constantly evolving, and the ability to access it all now is out there, right? I mean, you can go to chat and you can find out what's the latest and greatest digital tools on sustainability, the latest, greatest digital tools around manufacturing. It's literally at your fingertips in a way that never was before. And I think that's an area that, especially for seasoned engineers, don't hesitate to engage into it. I think so often in engineering, and certainly for me in my career, there's almost a hubris, right? It's like, I've got to solve this myself. But I think the greatest engineers work collaboratively and utilize all their tools, right? And chat is one of those tools. Now, you got to be careful because it's not always accurate, but it's an area that, it can jumpstart, right? Ideas, right? If you're word locked, right? It can help you if you've got an idea to refine it. And I think there's going to be a lot of amazing advancements in the next couple of years with AI and chat. And so that really drives into continuous learning. And the last piece is mentorship. We touched on that a little bit, but mentors from above, more seasoned resources, mentors from below, less seasoned resources. And then you take those 3. And the last thing I can say is always align your efforts with what matters most to your clients and the team, right? At the end of the day, if the team wins, you're going to win. And in the AEC world, so much of the team winning is the client winning. So that can be delivering a more sustainable design because that's one of the goals, right? It can be leveraging those digital tools to optimize. It can be driving better collaboration. Whatever the owners, the end users, the team's needs are and team's goals, I think if you keep those top of mind, you're really going to succeed. Whether you're just starting your career, you're mid-level, you're near in the next chapter in your life, I think those are all active components that can really build meaningful relationships. And then the day, that's what our industry is. Our industry is about meaningful relationships, networks that you create, and really positioning yourself to lead, right, in this dynamic and exciting space.
Beautifully said, John. And I think for all three of those points, like when you make them to people, it's one thing, but when they actually start trying, whether it's trying out chat for the first time or establishing a formal mentorship program, it really, that experience firsthand really hits home and gets people to see the value. So to the audience, I would just encourage you to take John's advice, go out there and just try it. But John, thank you again so much for joining us today. If the audience has any questions or wants to reach out to you about any of the topics we spoke about today, what's the best way for them to reach you?
No, thanks, Nick. And I appreciate you having me on. So best way to reach me is at john.glenski@salasobrien.com. You can also go to salasobrien.com and there'll be a link on our digital automation page. And then, reach out. Happy to connect. I really enjoy having these conversations. This is a passion of mine is how can we really drive manufacturing here and globally forward? And I think a lot of the items we talked about today are critical to that and the future here for us and our families.
Excellent. And John, thank you again so much for taking the time today.
Thanks, Nick. Appreciate it. Have a good one.
Absolutely. Till next time.
Take care.
Please remember, you can find the show notes for this episode at aectechpodcast.com. There, you will find a summary of the key points discussed in today's episode, as well as links to any of the resources, websites, or books mentioned during this episode. Until next time, I wish you the best in all of your engineering and technology endeavors. Thank you.